안녕하세요. 론 발언은 머스크의 말에 100% 동의를 하고 있습니다. 규제 완화가 돼야 된다라는 것이겠죠. 결국 우주 산업이 계속해서 발전을 하려면 비행할 때마다 허가를 받으면서는 속도가 안 나오게 되는 것입니다. 머스크는 론 발언의 지적이 정확하다라고 말하고 있죠. 그래서 사실상 머스크가 가장 신뢰하는 펀드 매니저 중 위대한 투자자 중에 한 명이 론 베런이 아닐까 싶습니다. 머스크는 언제나 론 베런의 말에 예스라고 대답을 합니다. 그래서 현재 론배런 같은 경우에는 10년 안에 테슬라의 시가총액이 5조 달러로 간다라고 말합니다. 현재 테슬라의 시가총액이 1조 달러. 그럼 지금 주가에서 5배가 올라가니까 1,500달러로 가는 것입니다. 하지만 여기서 머스크 같은 경우에는 롱텀으로 30조 달러를 말하고 있습니다. 지금 주가에서 30배가 올라간다라는 것이고, 그럼 테슬라 주가는 9,000달러입니다. 그리고 그 9,000달러가 되려면 옵티머스 로봇이 가장 큰 비즈니스가 돼야 되고 지구상에 있는 많은 사람들이 옵티머스를 이용해야겠죠. 하지만 그만큼 머스크는 자신이 있습니다. 현재 테슬라의 주가는 300달러대에서 거래가 되고 있고 론 베런은 1,500달러를 부르고 있으면서 머스크는 9,000달러를 말하고 있습니다. 언제나 신뢰할 수 있는 인터뷰를 제공하는 론 베런의 의견을 다 같이 한번 들어보겠습니다. 테슬라 주식을 가지신 분들이라면 반드시 봐야 되는 것이고요.
Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest is going to be weighing in on Tesla, Elon Musk's new role in the Trump administration, and much, much more. Joining us right now in an exclusive interview live from the 31st Annual Barron Conference is billionaire investor Ron Barron. Of course, he is Barron Capital's chairman and CEO. And Ron, we've been coming to this conference with you for years. We always look forward to it. This is the 31st Annual Conference. But this year, I have to say, the news cycle has kind of moved in such a way that we have a lot to talk about. And Elon Musk is probably the most interesting person on the planet outside of Donald Trump at this point. He is somebody everybody is watching from everywhere. You are a longtime investor. You're a longtime friend of his. And I just wonder what you think as you are watching all of this, because Tesla and SpaceX are your two biggest investments in the Barron funds. This has been a bit of a whirlwind.
Those two investments represent about 15% of our assets, about 10% for Tesla, 5% for SpaceX. I watched this with puzzlement, everything that's happening, but I think that one element that is going to be important for Elon is that he will be able to, he understands where there's unusual spending that's much greater than it should be, and how that can be corrected. Pretty easy, actually. You have a lot of cost-plus contracts. So there can be change to the way contracts work for SpaceX, where they take the risk instead of the government. So cost-plus contracts are anathema to operating.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Anathema. What's the word? They're a bad thing. Cost-plus contracts don't work very well for the person who's contracting. Is that if you want to go back and forth, you want to go to Mars and you get 1 million people up there, you got to launch regularly in your sites regularly, like a lot of times every day. And if you have to go get permits every time you launch, airplanes don't have to get permits every time they launch, every time they take off. If you have to do that, that really slows you down. You can't do it. So basically, there has to be change in regulations also. So there have to be more reasonable regulations than are in place right now, and you have to have different, this cost-plus contract stuff has to go.
So you've been a longtime Democrat. You've been pretty outspoken about that, but you're also a longtime supporter of Elon Musk's. What do you think of the election results and the government that we're going to be facing?
I think that he had similar views to mine. I don't feel like I'm a Democrat anymore, but he had similar views to mine, and for a long time. But I think that the Democratic Party has been taken over by unions, teachers' unions, UAW. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting is that they had an EV summit at the White House. Everyone's been talking about this a year or two ago, and in that period, they had the leading people for electric cars were invited to the White House to meet with President Biden. And Musk was invited initially and then disinvited. And the person who was praised for leading the way and in the conversion was Mary Barra. I love Mary Barra, but Mary Barra in that quarter did 29 cars, 29 electric cars. We did 300,000. And she was the one who was invited, and she was the one who was praised as the leader in this conversion from gasoline cars to electric cars. So that's because the UAW said, I don't want Elon Musk in the White House. And so it's a lot of these interested parties that say that, no, it doesn't work for me to have someone who's non-union. The reason UAW has been unsuccessful unionizing Tesla's plants is because the people in Tesla's plants are becoming wealthy because they're shareholders in Tesla stock. Same thing for SpaceX. So you can't unionize people if they're doing great where they are. Last year there were 5.8 million people. 5.8 million people applied for jobs at Tesla and SpaceX for 30,000 jobs. 5.8 million people for 30,000 jobs. Tesla might have 150,000 people and SpaceX probably 15,000, but they had 5.8 million. They get the best people. They get the best people who do the best. And how do you take people like that and make them into a union where they're just taking something off the top and it's a job that's not that interesting?
When did you decide that you were no longer really a Democrat? Has that been over the last several years?
A lot of policies they have. I'm an independent. A lot of policies that they have I don't agree with.
Okay, you are an investor. Your top two holdings are Tesla and SpaceX. You also have a holding in X.com. And Elon's got a pretty large role in this new incoming Trump administration. Do you worry at all as an investor that that's going to take more of his time, or do you think his companies will benefit because he's able to be there?
This is an advisory role, so I don't think right now he's doing a lot of advising. I don't know how active he is in choosing the people who are being placed in these roles.
Does the huge jump in the stock price make sense to you as an investor? And what are you doing just in terms of buying and selling?
Well, stock price is the same as it was 3 years ago. So it was higher 3 years ago than it is today, actually.
Yeah.
And the way I think about Tesla is I think that our cost, I met him in 2010. It took 4 years before I became convinced to invest in him. He said, what took you so long? And we invested $400 million between 2014 and 2016.
Just in Tesla, or is that
just
everything?
In Tesla.
Just in Tesla.
$400 million in Tesla, 14 to 16, and we made about $6 billion in profit so far. And we sold a quarter of our stock in 2020.
Yeah.
3 years ago, 2021, after it had gone up 20 times. And
there were people who questioned you at the time why you were selling 25%. I think you told us that it was because it had gotten to be such a big part of the portfolio.
Yeah, it was too big. It was 20 and up 20 times. And the idea that I wanted to have is I didn't want people to think that I had died, and that's why they still own the stock. So I wanted to. And by the way, so one of my good friends is Will Danoff, and he is at Fidelity. And I was telling him I just read something about the people who've done the best in your funds are the people who are dead. Is that true? He says, well, I never heard that before, but I'll look it up. So he goes and looks it up. He calls me back the next day. He said, well, you challenge me all the time. 3% of my shareholders are dead, and they actually have held it on an average for 18 years, and they're my best performing shareholders.
Well, that goes to your point of you buy things and you hold for very long periods of time.
As long as they're doing well.
Yeah.
And when they're not doing well, or when the fundamentals change, or it becomes too big a percentage of the portfolio,
well,
we reduce.
You went through a couple of years where you could have classified Tesla as such. You had a couple of rough years, and talk to us in the middle of some of those years over the last 3 years.
Well, 2014 to 2016, when we invested that $400 million, the stock was acting like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And for the past 3 years, the stock has also been a yo-yo performing stock because what they're doing is that they're reinvesting in their business. They're penalizing current profitability to become a much bigger business in the future. And whenever that happens, so the reason we've outperformed, so I was telling you before, 97% of our assets do better than the indexes, 94, 95%, top 20%.
You have $45 billion in assets under management right now.
Right.
And that, in terms of what the profits you've paid back to investors since 1992 when the partnership first began, that's $49 billion?
We had $100 million in under management in 1992, $10 million in 1982. Now it's $45 billion, but we've made $49 billion in profits. So we paid people over the past 30 years $4 billion more than we made them, more than they've given us. But we now have $45 billion. I'm hoping that in the next 10 years we can quadruple our assets.
Your faith in Elon Musk sounds like it's stronger than ever. Is this a stock that you would sell? Just from the perspective of if it goes up so much, it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of your portfolio.
So I think that it's right now worth $1 trillion. And what's Bitcoin? $1.7 trillion? So would I rather have 2 Teslas or 1 Bitcoin? So basically, the way I think about it is that Tesla, I think, is going to be worth $3 or $4 trillion, $5 trillion in 10 years, based upon the business plan that I'm aware of. And then Elon believes that longer term, it's going to be worth $30 trillion. It's now being worth $1 trillion.
Do you believe that?
Well, the people from Goldman Sachs were doing something for me. One of the executives in California who's being groomed, I think, to be the next CEO of Goldman Sachs, he and 3 other people from Goldman came to visit me this past summer at my house in East Hampton. And they were telling me, his name is Dan Dees, they were telling me that Elon, Goldman then was struggling to get their business value from 150 billion in the market to 180 billion. So Elon said, why don't you come to my plant in Palo Alto where I have Optimus robots? I want you to see what that is. So he says, so we go there, I take the board and we go out to, he says, Ron, it's dystopian, it's amazing, you gotta go see this. So I went to see it. And there's robots walking all over. And the idea that he has is that, so here we have, there wouldn't be any EVs without him, there wouldn't be any autonomous driving without him, there wouldn't be any rockets you use over and over without him, you wouldn't have any Starlink without him. So the idea is that this Optimus robots, he thinks is going to be his biggest business ever. And he thinks that, he says everyone's going to have robots. There's always been, I can't predict the market. I don't even try. So everyone comes in and says, what's the market going to do? I have no idea. And I don't even try. We interview analysts and we don't even talk about stocks. We interview analysts. I want to know who they are. Yeah. I don't care about what they know. I want really smart people, and I want them to be able to be trained the way we look at things, first principles research, to just look at things, rip it apart in your head, put it back together, see if it makes sense. If you like the business and think the prospects are good and you trust the people, then invest in it.